Ty Cobb, baseball's most explosive star. Loved, feared, hated. Pitchers shook at the very sight of him. Infielders and catchers often bled from his spikes. There was only one Ty Cobb in baseball history. He could show his son his curious hands-apart batting grip, but not his flaming competitive heart. These forerunners of the Little League visited Ty Cobb in 1925 when he was managing the Detroit Tigers. If there was anything the kids really wanted in life, it was to be like Ty Cobb. He captured their imaginations with his hitting, his base stealing, his leadership. Some of these kids would be heard from again in baseball. Their model was Cobb, their aim the big leagues. Who was this great example to American youth? And what right did he have to be held up as an example? Well, to begin with, he was not a saint. Cobb would fight any man on or off the field and at the drop of a hat. He could be vain, too, but very few athletes ever had more reason to be so. Cobb amassed more records than any other man in baseball history. 892 stolen bases. Batting champion 12 times. His lifetime batting average of .367 over 24 years of competition has never been seriously approached even. A small-town boy from backcountry Georgia, Ty Cobb crashed the big leagues in 1905, and baseball was never the same again. Old baseball pros like Reb Russell, John Collins, Red Faber, and Clarence Rowland all looked up to Cobb as the greatest the game ever produced. In 1927, Cobb left his player-manager post at Detroit to join the ranks of the Philadelphia Athletics. Manager Connie Mack and all Philadelphia turned out to greet him. Another famed American showed up to see the Georgia Peach in action, Thomas Alva Edison. Edison makes Ty duck, one of the very few men who ever accomplished that feat. Ty Cobb retired in 1929 and took an American team to the rugby fields of England. Ty's reputation had preceded him. His enduring records will survive his death in 1961. The man who filled the record books most, Ty Cobb. (1930), the year Bobby Jones and the word golf meant one and the same thing. That was the year of the Grand Slam. Jones won the United States Open, the United States Amateur, the British Open, and the British Amateur. It had never been done before, and it probably will never be done again. For 7 years, beginning in 1923, Jones hammered his name into the record books. Few athletes before or since have been more feared by their competitors or more idolized by their fans. Watch now as Jones demonstrates the smooth, easy power that carried him through victory after victory. His irons had the authority and accuracy of a bullet. Bobby emerged from Georgia Tech and Harvard Law School at 21 and already a great golfing sensation. Actually, he'd played the game quite well since the age of 7. Bobby retired from active competition following the Grand Slam of 1930, but the patterns of play and of sportsmanship that he developed hold true to this day. He is emulated by thousands of respected pros and copied by countless up-and-coming youngsters. On fairway, rough or green, Bobby Jones was a past master. In a series of typical problem shots, Jones demonstrated his magic touch. There's an old golf bromide that goes, "You'll never get rich by hitting the ditch." Well, here Bobby straddles the obstacle and gets back to give a match. As for that scourge of the duffer, the sand trap, watch this blast out. The image of Bobby Jones has been etched into every golf instruction book down to the present day. He was equally masterful with the driver, the iron, or Calamity Jane, his famous putter. This is the grip that seized 4 U.S. national and 5 amateur championships and won 4 top British championships to boot. There have been few golfers who were as cool under fire. This great champion challenged the best, won just about everything, constantly made shots that seemed impossible. His name was Bobby Jones. Finland's Paavo Nurmi set the fastest pace of his time as the world's great runners edged toward a coveted but seemingly unattainable goal, the 4-minute mile. By 1934, America's tenacious Glenn Cunningham was thrilling crowds with his blazing finishes. But the miracle mile remained as elusive as a rainbow. But then in 1954, a young Englishman surged ahead of his relay of competitors, and it happened. This was Roger Bannister, a 25-year-old medical student whose flashing spikes were carving his name in the sports record books forever. Track fans, sensing the historic moment was at hand, cheered the laboring Bannister to go all out, and go all out he did, bursting over the finish line in a phenomenal 3 minutes, 59 and 4/10 seconds. Inspired by Bannister's heroic feat, Australia's John Landy clipped the mile record to 3 minutes, 58 seconds. Track experts and the record books proclaimed him the world's top miler. In almost every race, Landy's effortless strides kept him well out in front. In this race, we can see the running style employed by Bannister. Unlike Landy, Bannister held back before overtaking the front runner with a characteristic last lap sprint. Bannister ran with a loping motion, a cool scientific technician. But when the chips were down, he was all heart. Bannister was to prove it in a race that became inevitable. Bannister, the mild, studious, and sportsmanlike barrier breaker, would be pitted against the great Landy in a 2-man duel. This was the British Empire Games, Vancouver, Canada, 1954, the mile of the century. As expected, Landy broke out into an early lead. Bannister dogged Landy's heels. Now in the last lap, Bannister opens up. Watch as Bannister calls on superhuman reserves to outrun the man whose name stood at the top of the record books. Bannister crashes over the finish line and collapses from the titanic effort. Though Landy's record still stood, this classic race marked the first time 2 men in the same race ever finished the mile in under 4 minutes. Bannister appeared far more exhausted than Landy. The young Englishman had finished on pure willpower, the same willpower that had first broken the 4-minute barrier to immortalize the name of Roger Bannister. America's Olympic team embarked for Nazi Germany, the site of the 1936 Olympiad, facing a challenge which unfortunately had nothing whatsoever to do with sports. But Olympic officials were hopeful.
Thanks to the patriotic sportsmen of America, we're off to Berlin with the largest and finest team that we have ever sent abroad.
These departing competitors had the additional burden of proving democracy's athletes were not inferior to the so-called Nazi supermen who had risen in the age of Adolf Hitler. The challenge leveled at Americans by the Nazis was this. The democracies were decadent. They bred inferior people. The Olympic Games said Hitler would prove the greater vitality of fascism. Democracy's athletes set out to prove Hitler's theory was pure poppycock. Hitler intended to forge from the Olympic flame a propaganda victory for his perverted race theories. But in the ranks of the American Olympic squad stood one young man who was to trample the Nazi race theories under his flashing spikes. His name was Jesse Owens, American, and to the eventual dismay of the Nazis, a Negro also. Jesse Owens had come out of Alabama. He had starred in classroom and track at Ohio State University and had emerged as one of the great sports figures of his generation. At home in the USA, Jesse had excelled in the 100-yard dash and the 220 and the running broad jump. But Jesse had no way of knowing that he was also to leap into history as a champion of democracy. This was Berlin. Watch now as Jesse leaps over 26 feet 5 inches. His first gold medal, his first victory over the Supermen. America's victory offended Nazi sensitivities, but that wasn't all. The Yank of the so-called inferior racial origin was to win 3 more gold medals. The classic 100 meters dash, the 200, and he anchored the relay team that ran the Nazi squad into the ground. Owens was welcomed home by multitudes, including 2 other famous Americans, tap dancer Bill Robinson and the great Jack Dempsey. Jesse proved he had brains as well as brawn.
Turn professional? Turn professional, I do not know. As I said before, I have another year in school, and I haven't any plans about turning professional whatsoever.
An enduring credit to his race and his country, Jesse Owens. This is the Iron Horse, the pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig. Here he is as a kid with his idol, Babe Ruth, when Lou first came to the Yanks. Lou came to the Bombers directly from Columbia University, where he made the line roar for 4 long years as a student and athlete. Lou could hit that ball, and he could run. He could run like a deer. In this great shot, he homers to bring in Babe Ruth himself. Lou was a ball player. This was his bludgeon through a record-breaking 2,170 consecutive games. He was a pro, a real pro. His batting stance was acclaimed by old-timers and copied by youngsters throughout the land. His follow-through in his personal life as well as on the field made him one of the most idolized sports figures of this century. Lou covered first base. He really covered it. Here's a perfect example of how Lou protected the bag and followed the runner trying to get the jump on his pitcher. Lou's reach for the low ones when it counted and made him a Yankee Stadium immortal. He was a big man, but he moved with the agility of a bantam. He broke up this all-star game and also Dizzy Dean, as demonstrated in this shot from the Pathé Film Vaults. His own personal motto, "Don't Quit," was embossed on a plaque presented to him at Lou Gehrig's farewell day at the stadium. The all-time baseball greats turned out to salute this failing Iron Man. Here he is with his buddy, the great Bambino. Jim Farley was among those who wished him well. New York's Mayor LaGuardia, another fan of Lou's, was there to shake the once mighty hand. This was Lou's touching farewell to baseball.
Jay, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. But I might have been given a bad break, but I've got an awful lot to live for. Thank you.
Stricken with an incurable disease, Lou retired, never to return and never to be replaced. His number 4 resides now at Cooperstown, New York, in baseball's Hall of Fame. This is Lou Gehrig, the pride of the Yankees, my friend, and truly a man of destiny. These are the first motion pictures ever made of Ringham's most ferocious man of destiny. Hard, handsome, with whipcord muscles, Jack Dempsey trained most fiercely. A few short years before, he had been a tramp, a hobo, roaming through the tough towns of the West. It was difficult keeping him in sparring partners, for he ripped into them without mercy, using the bobbing, weaving style with which he was to cut down Jess Willard in a one-sided slaughter to become heavyweight champion of the world. A tremendous mob jams Jersey City. The date is July 2nd, 1921. The occasion, the Dempsey-Carpentier fight. The birth of big-time boxing, history's first $1 million game. Notice the sign $20 to $40 section. Big prices in a day when 25 cents could buy you a full meal. But the prices did not keep the crowds away. 80,000 people filled every inch of Boyle's 30 acres. This sea of fans saw the champion, Dempsey, knock out the popular Frenchman, Carpentier, in 4 rounds. Crowds came a-running wherever Dempsey went. Fans mobbed him, tore his clothing. His fame was as great as that of the President of the United States. For these were the roaring 20s, America's golden age of sports. The mauler from Manassas, Colorado, had 148 fights in his ring career and won 108 of them by knockouts. Jack was as gentle and modest outside the ring as he was brutal and ruthless within. But even the champion was not invincible. We're watching one of his worst defeats at the hands of a rising young pugilist. In the middle 20s, Dempsey went to Hollywood. He now applied lipstick and eye makeup to the face that he once soaked in brine to toughen the skin against opponents' blows. This rough-necked hobo had come very far from the days of poverty and riding the rails. Back in New York, Dempsey showed off his new movie star bride, Estelle Taylor. The wild killer of old was gone. The new Jack Dempsey could even be playful in the ring. He was no longer a hungry, desperate fighter. And it was perhaps this that, in the end, cost him his championship. Here's the man in review. At 24, the challenger. At 27, the champion. At 31, beaten by Gene Tunney. At 36, he tries a comeback. And at 49, greeting his old pal Tunney. This is Jack Dempsey, one of sport's great men of destiny. He was born Joseph Louis Barrow in abject poverty in Alabama, 1914. He will be forever remembered everywhere as Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber. Joe's explosive career spanned 71 professional fights over a period of 17 years. He could take out a man with a punch from either hand. He could be as savage inside the ring as he was gentle outside it. Joe won the heavyweight title from James J. Braddock in Chicago in 1937. He defended that title 25 times, ducking no man and knocking out 22 of those challengers. Louis came up from a dismal Alabama farm, struggled through underprivileged schooling to young manhood in Detroit, became the idol of an oppressed race. Everyone called him the Brown Bomber, But no matter how they colored it, Joe was everybody's champion in this land. During his record heavyweight reign, no cry was ever heard for a so-called white hope to do him in. Joe defended the championship against all comers of all sizes and races and colors for over 11 years. His dramatic bouts never put anyone to sleep, except, of course, his opponents. Joe's first wedding was big news. His Army service was big news, too. Everything he did was accented by the pop of camera flash guns. General Mark Clark greeted Joe during one of the champion's many Army exhibition fights. Behind all the fanfare, Joe quietly donated 2 big purses to Army and Navy charities. Joe Louis, born in great poverty, grossed over $11 million with his fists. But there were so many drains on him that he wound up owing Uncle Sam $250,000 in back taxes. Joe became the bountiful friend, always his bounty, by the way, of thousands and thousands, and the intimate of the famed. In 1949, he retired. At this press conference, I came prepared to ask Joe everything, except, of course, did he want to go a few rounds with me.
Say, Joe, why did you give up the heavyweight championship of the world?
Well, I gave up the title because this was a fine opportunity that I have to promote fights and also to stay in boxing.
And I believe back in the ends of our minds, we hope to see you fight again. Is there any chance that you might get tired of promoting one of these days and go back in the ring?
No, I don't think I'll get tired of promoting because I don't get hit as a promoter.
Financial troubles prompted a Joe Louis comeback attempt, but time had taken away the great combination of reflex, power, and endurance. What time could never erase, however, was his amazing record and the warmth and respect evoked by the sound of his name. That name stands forever in the sports annals and the heart of America, Joe Louis.